I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition. Yesterday, I drove my bike down to our local grocery store to pick up some food for dinner. And as I was standing at the checkout sign or checkout stand, giving the person my credit card, I noticed a little sign that said that the deli would be closed come August 1st. And I was kind of sad to see this because I really like this deli. They have wonderful sandwiches and have been down there many times. I asked the person who I was giving the money to, why were you having to close down this wonderful little deli? And I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted to hear what they had to say. And they said, well, it's because we just don't have enough employees. And of course, that's an issue that we're finding all over the place. Restaurants don't have enough employees, so they're not staying open past 8 o'clock at night. Or companies have 100, 200, 300 open recs because we can't find good people. And it goes on and on and on. Our economy is certainly being affected by this lack of employees being able to fill badly needed positions. And so recruitment and finding the right person is now an incredibly important part of what many people are now talking about. My next guest on the Business of Intuition lives and breathes in this space. And she actually has some wonderful ideas about how we can move away from maybe an older way that we were a little bit sloppy about recruitment, both on the perspective of the company, but also on the perspective of the employee or the potential employee, and how we can really focus on creating what she calls a 5-star team. And so she's got 5 really, I think, wonderful ideas about what organizations, whether they be small, medium, or large, should really be focused on in order to get that 5-star team. Her name is Heenle Turner. Heenle stands for cool water, which I think is wonderful given the hot weather we are now experiencing. So Heenle is a certified HR professional with a passion for helping businesses succeed. Heenle has a proven HR background in her consultant business, and she's worked with over 200 companies in varying sizes and industries. Heenle's experience in sales and customer service and people management has uniquely positioned her to partner with entrepreneurs and business leaders to recruit and retain a team of their 5-star employees. Heenle Turner on the Business of Intuition. So Heenle, thanks for being a guest on the Business of Intuition. It's great to have you. And I love the fact that your name means cool water. I think that is awesome.
Me too.
I love that. I don't know. It's just like, when you told me that that's what the meaning was, I thought, what a perfect name for a very hot summer. So I'm looking forward to our discussion. We were talking earlier before we hit the record button about your work. And you were mentioning that a lot of companies do not customize and personalize their recruiting, I suppose for scale and efficiency. But can you kind of give us some of the don'ts and the problems that companies go through when it comes to recruiting? And then, of course, I want to spin into what should they be doing?
Sure. So, thank you. First, thank you for having me here. So one thing I find, very common and a little bit about myself, I've worked with over, 200 different businesses, and I've consulted with them on various aspects of HR. And now I focus on recruiting and hiring and onboarding and retaining. And what I find is, people are looking for that quick fix, right? So if I'm interviewing, if I'm looking for a salesperson, I see that most business owners are, going to Google sales questions to ask during an interview. And maybe 10 or 15 populate, right? What's your favorite thing about working in sales? Why are you working for this company? What interests you about, my company specifically? And, people are are serial interviewers. They're great at providing an answer and they're great at selling you because surprise, surprise, they're salespeople. But the question is that enough? Like, is that process yielding you the 5-star salespeople that you want? And odds are they're not, because one, you realize in 2 or 3 weeks that the person kind of sucks and they're not making the sales for you. So, you need to be more specific. Like, what do you want? So, like, for me, I want somebody who's closing at a 90% sales rate, close rate. And so the question I'm going to ask a candidate is, what was your close rate when you first started at your last job? And what's your close rate today? And a rock star, 5-star salespeople, they know that information because they brag about it. They love it. They're the rock stars of their team.
So would that be true for those who are not in sales to be able to ask those same sort of specific questions? Say it's a human resource person, it's a recruiter, it's a trainer, it's a mid-level manager of a manufacturing company. You're saying that the questions that you would ask in an interview, for example, would be specific and targeted, well thought out for that particular job function.
Correct. Right. And so, like, for instance, I had when I was recruiting myself for an assistant role in our HR field, I asked the question, well, why, what is your number one responsibility at your, like, as an HR practitioner, as an HR person? And the answer I was looking for was, you know, keeping the company away from fines, keeping the company out of trouble. And that is going to be achieved by keeping your employees, happy and satisfied and kind of working into a great culture and working in an environment where there is, openness and communication and people are listened to. And so there was a discussion there with myself and the candidate about why that is so important. But that answer was excellent, because when I talked to the business owner, I said, what are you looking for? They're like, I just don't want to deal with, upset employees. I don't want to do anything wrong. And I just keep me out of trouble. That was it. Keep me out of trouble. And so we have to understand what the owner is looking for in that person, and in order to formulate the questions to find that person.
Are you finding that when you talk to owners or hiring managers at companies, this is my guess, and I'm wondering what your thought is, that a lot of us understaffed, somewhat burned out, post-COVID fatigue, and we're just trying to get through the day, the month, the quarter, and we got to get a body in here pretty darn quick because we have supply chain issues, we got interest rates going up, there's talk of a potential recession. So we're in a little bit of a fear mode, and we're trying to either prevent something from happening or solve something that has happened. Are you finding that these owners, these leaders, these managers are not taking the time to really think about what kind of person they're trying to hire, not just on a short-term basis, but from a longer-term perspective?
Yeah, I am. And, the conversation is very similar to what you've described. Is people are looking for that warm body. Anybody with a pulse, like, come on in, let's get you started and let's just do a test run and see if this works. And what I challenge, business owners and hiring managers to think about is time and efficiency. Because if you give everybody a shot, if you don't have standards, if you don't find the right people the first time, then you'll realize in a few weeks that they're not the right fit. The people in your organization who are 5-star employees are going to be picking up the slack for the new people who hired, who just don't have it, who are not those elite performers. And you'll find yourself replacing them anyway.
So next question I wanted to ask you about is, do you feel that candidates, because they're so sought after, have become sloppy in their approach to getting employed?
I think I don't know if I would use the word sloppy, but I would say they are becoming more, unintentional. So now they'll apply everywhere. In your interview, they'll ask you, "Oh, what have I applied for? What company is this?" They'll apply to, anything that is remotely in the area that they're looking for because they're just kind of looking for a job. And in this environment, we know how difficult it is to find people, let alone the right people, let alone qualified people. So, you need to do something to, as a person who's hiring somebody, hiring your next five-star employee, you've got to do something to make sure you don't tempt yourself with these sloppy people. So like even sloppy people sloppy people, I don't know that you want them working for you anyway. Right.
No, yeah, and I agree with you. I guess my point was so much. I've heard stories where
I have
somebody
too.
has set up a series of interviews, and a couple of people just don't show up. They're ghosted, right?
Oh my gosh,
And that
totally.
kind of, I guess, it's a vague term, but that sort of lack of professionalism that says, I've decided to go somewhere else. I'm not going to apply for this job anymore. Ergo, I'm going to let the hiring manager know ahead of time. I mean, it was this, or that they're not taking the interview process as seriously by really thinking through what questions do they want to ask the employer? How do they best position themselves for this particular job? Because, quite frankly, I've got my pick of the litter. I've got 5 or 6 different companies are sort of like looking at me, responding to me in a way that I never thought they would. This is going to be a cakewalk. I guess what's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, and that's totally it. And like you got to think is like if like I had a client the other day, or not a client, well, two stories. So me personally at my previous job, we were hiring another HR professional. She went through, two interviews, she background checks, drug screening, passed everything, offered the job, accepted the job, had a start date, was sent all her equipment, never showed up,
Mm,
just didn't show up. And that's a professional role, right?
yeah,
And I've also had people who were in the interview process, and it's very similar to what you're saying. They just don't show up. So
yeah,
I'm schedule the interview and they don't show up. And it's kind of just, what it is today. Like that's the reality of what we're looking for. And as the person who's hiring, like I would say, think of those folks as the people you need to filter out of your process. So
right.
you don't even want those people to apply for your job because you've made it just a little bit more difficult. So like we had a client that we worked with, and so what they did is in their job posting, we had them write specific instructions, right? So email your resume with the subject line, hire me today, something like that. And then when they went to look at their email inbox, if there was a subject line that didn't say, they only looked at candidates who used that specific subject line.
Mm,
Anybody else was filtered out. So
I
those
see.
people were probably the sloppy ones applying for every position out there. They don't really care. So
Yeah.
they were not a match for this five-star
I
chiropractic
remember
office.
when we were hiring somebody years ago. I remember back in the day when the power was more on the side of the employer, versus the way it is now. I remember people like sending in resumes for things like, wait a minute, we're not that kind of a company. We're not a pharmaceutical company. We're not, like read the description, read the
Mhm.
job description, right? I just found that fascinating. Again, that sort of that sloppy quick fix approach that you're talking about. When it comes to the recruiter for these companies, I know that you do recruiting, you get paid to do that, but sometimes you might have access to sort of like what's the life like for these recruiters for these larger companies. I'm hearing that they're a bit burned out. It's a tough job right now. Do you have any suggestions for them, in terms of sort of getting through this period?
Well, yeah. So what's funny is we work with business owners because we find that by setting up and investing in setting up your own kind of customized and personalized assets, that you don't need to use a recruiter,
Mm.
right? So the idea is that you've got this process and it's saving you so much time and resources. It's an investment to create these kind of tools for an organization. And once you have them in place, recruiting becomes very easy. And for the recruiters out there, it's tough, right? It's a tough matchmaking gig for them as well, because they've got this enormous pool of clients, of businesses that they're just trying to find people for. And, without some type of like customization or some kind of niche or something that is a little bit more personalized, um, I I suppose I wouldn't want to be in that gig right now.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Right?
I get it. Yeah. So I guess as we've been kind of bouncing around here a little bit, you talked about some of the issues that are facing the industry. We're talking about sort of the state of mind of the people who are seeking jobs. Is there like a model, or like some pillars that you would suggest people think about as they try to get to that 5-star team? What are some like 3 or 4 or 5 major things? If you do these 5 things, with these 3 things, you're going to be so far ahead of everybody else when it comes to recruiting.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
are they?
So, as your followers, your avid listeners know, one is it's so important for the business owner to define their own core values, right? And so I think you had another guest who spoke about this in detail, so I won't spend too much time there. But ultimately, you need to outline and decide what is important for you. So what's important for you 100% of the time, and that's what your goal should be in terms of finding the right people for your organization, are those whose core values align with your own. So one, you need to have true core values. Two, you need to look for people who share the 11 universal qualities of 5-star employees. And so of course, have those handy right now, and I will share some of those with you. So 5-star employees are supportive, collaborative, proactive. They complete their tasks, they achieve their goals, they provide quantifiable results for you, and they actively listen to fellow team members. They communicate their thoughts pretty easily, and they're open to feedback. So you've got to find, that second star, you've got to find people who have those qualities.
Hmm.
And you need to really define. The third thing you need to do is define what the responsibility is for each role in your organization and create job specific success metrics. So, for example, when we spoke earlier about the salesperson, um, you know, for someone to be successful as a salesperson, what are you looking for? Does that mean a 95% close rate? Does that mean
Hmm.
they generate 10 new leads a week? So being very specific about what success looks like in that role is going to help you in that recruitment process later on, because then again, you know what you're looking for.
Good.
And then
Good. Yeah. What more? Yeah. Is there a fourth or fifth? Yeah.
say more. Yeah. um, and you, of course, need to know like what success looks like in the role, but you also need to know what the aptitudes and skills are for that particular role. So if I'm looking for somebody to fill an accounting position, I must understand that they're good with numbers, that they are a checklist person, they're organized, right? And so you need to define these specific attributes so that again you can look for that in your recruitment process. And like one big tip I have is you need to implement some kind of skills testing for every
Hmm.
position that you hire for. So I can tell you that I can type at 2,000 words a minute, but is that the same as me taking a 1-minute typing test and you seeing that as a result?
That's a great point you make there. But what do you do when you have a person that you're trying to place in a position and the position is around, say, leadership, management, things that are a little harder to measure?
hmm Yeah, I mean, I might for like a leadership or management role, in as a skills testing, like I might look at that role and see, okay, what is it that this person is going to be doing? So, for example, if the leader in a leadership role, so if you're hiring for some kind of manager, then I might give them a scenario to draft a response to, right? So like a writing exercise that they send me as a sample for me to try to understand how they compose themselves, how they will
Hmm.
come across to other people if they're giving feedback. So say you're trying to look how they would provide feedback to somebody, or if you're looking for someone who needs to be, creating reports for you or creating a presentation, then I would again try to develop a skills testing that's specific to that. So again, it's what we do is very customized and it's designed to attract the person for that particular role.
Very good. Excellent. So I got 5 tips I ended up taking down. I'm not sure that you had thought of the 5, but I've got define core values, look for 5-star employees, and you got several things that you had mentioned that fall under those characteristics of a 5-star employee. You mentioned define the job responsibilities and the specific job success metrics. I think that's really something
Mhm.
that really is sticking out for me, that I don't think we do enough of that. What kind of skills are needed? And then wherever possible, do some sort of skills testing. And if it's not something like typing, maybe scenarios, case studies.
Mhm.
What if you were in this? How would you manage this? Give us a sample of your work, that kind of thing.
Right. And like we worked with a digital marketing agency and they needed people to create. So that's what they asked for, samples of their social media posts,
Hmm, very
right?
good.
So almost like a portfolio.
That's great. Well, so tell me or tell us, how can we follow you? What's coming up for you in the future? And how do we connect with you either on social media, your website, things you're posting, you're writing about? How do we know more about you?
Yeah. The best way is to check out our site, which is, surprise, surprise, it's 5staremployees.com. And you can also send me an email and we'll include that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, great and timely tips given the situation we're in right now. I really appreciate your time and your energy. And, thanks again. And hopefully our paths will cross again in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.